There are a few common mistakes in F1 2021 that we see costing drivers massive lap time and consistency. In this video, we're going to review those mistakes, the technical reasons why they happen, and give you quick tips to fix them. My name's Scott Mansell. I've been racing all of my life and coaching in the real world and the sim for over 15 years. I've driven more than 25 Formula 1 cars and worked with thousands of drivers all around the world. The first mistake we see is when a driver's vision is too close to the car and not far enough down the track. Formula 1 cars are very fast and it can be hard to keep up with their pace when you're going around corners at 160 miles an hour. This can be even harder when your vision isn't in the right place on track. We see many drivers keeping their vision just in front of the car, as you would do if you were driving on the road. But when you do this, your inputs are behind where they need to be because you're not giving yourself the right information at the right time. This will make it almost impossible to get up to speed and be consistent, because if you're not looking in the right place, you're not seeing the circuit at the right time and you can't make the right adjustments on your inputs as you travel through a corner. So the way to think about your vision is in terms of time rather than distance, and your vision should be at least 2 to 3 seconds ahead of where the car is currently positioned. This will give you enough time to think about your racing line, to think about how much speed you're taking into each corner and make the correct adjustments to the car. So to put this into context, by the time you are braking, your eyes should already be at the apex of the corner. And just before you get to the apex of the corner, your eyes should be looking towards the exit curbing. When this is done right, your car will flow around the track and your inputs will be very smooth because you are absorbing the correct information at the right time. Now, we often get asked, how do you see the braking points and ensure that you hit your apexes? You can actually spot all of these with your peripheral vision. Use your peripheral vision to observe the braking points and quickly assess the curbs. And when you use your peripheral vision, it means that you can keep your main visual focus ahead of the car. The next issue that we see is drivers trying to push too hard and braking too late. We all love watching drivers like Danny Rick get on the brakes as late as possible for spectacular pace and brilliant overtaking maneuvers. And we've heard all of these drivers talk about how this is the best way to gain pace. The other thing to think about here is that when we brake later, the time delta will for an instant go green, making us feel like we're gaining lap time, but ultimately that may not be the case. Braking later can help during overtakes, but it can distract from the main goal of pushing the car through a corner as quickly as possible. And while we do need to brake late, often drivers will actually brake too late and disrupt the flow of the car through the corner. Most of the time, drivers will gain more time through getting good exits rather than focusing on the entry. And a bad entry can ruin your exit. The exit speed of a corner is really important because if you carry 1 mile an hour more coming out of the corner, you continue to carry that extra speed down the following straight. And this is a big chunk of time, resulting in a lower lap time. So make sure you focus on keeping your car on the perfect racing line. If you go into a corner too deep and brake too late, then you won't be on this perfect racing line and you'll be losing time. Make sure you pick your braking point. Make sure that you're conscious of this braking point and you can edge it forward or backward depending on how your car enters the corner. You'll want to make sure that you get on the throttle around the apex point. Any later than this and you'll be losing lots of time on the exit. The car here should feel smooth and controlled when going through the corner. If it feels messy, then it's likely that you'll be losing time. It may feel like it's slower because there's less action going on, but always remember, slow in, fast out. The next issue that we see is when a driver will significantly overlap their inputs. We often see drivers significantly overlapping the steering with braking or throttle. This can include things like turning too much when the car is slowing down and should be in a straight line, or getting on the throttle too hard when the driver is at full steering angle in the mid-corner. This will dramatically decrease your braking and turning and acceleration efficiency. The reason for this is that the tyres of your race car only have a finite amount of grip. When you're braking, we want to be using the majority of that grip for slowing the car down. Any extra steering angle that you use in the car at this point will be using some of that grip for turning rather than slowing the car down. This goes for the same when you're in the mid-corner and all of that tyre's grip wants to be used for turning the car rather than deceleration or acceleration. And it also goes for when you're accelerating out of a corner like a hairpin, where again you want to get the car in more or less of a straight line so that you can use all the tyre's grip for accelerating the car down the next straight. If you substantially overlap these inputs, you're going to be reducing the overall amount of grip that the car has, and therefore you won't be able to go through the corner quite as quickly. So to break this down a little bit, you want to make sure that you do the majority of your big braking, your big deceleration in a straight line. And when you start turning, you should have already begun to release the brakes, so that tyre's grip can be transferred to turning the car rather than slowing it down. Then once you're coming into the apex and you want to be accelerating out of the corner, you'll need to make sure that you begin to open up the steering angle so that tyre's grip can be used for acceleration rather than turning. The next issue that we see a lot is to do with trail braking. Now this technique is slightly more of an intermediate level. Now I've just mentioned that you want to do the majority of the braking in a straight line, but after this point, when you turn the car into the corner, we often see drivers releasing the brakes very quickly before they turn into the corner. And there is a definite sweet spot with how you release the brake pedal. Too slowly and you'll likely push through the corner, as I previously explained. Too quickly and it shocks the balance of the car, leaving you with less grip to travel through the corner. This then limits the speed that you can take through the corner and makes the car more difficult to drive. If you think about what's physically happening with the car, it's quite easy to see why you have less grip. Imagine you're coming down to a hairpin corner and you're hard on the brakes, taking the speed out of the car, but then you just release the brakes before you turn into the corner. Well, the front of the car will rise up very quickly and unload those front tyres, meaning that the balance of the car shifts backwards. The front tyres will then not have enough weight pushing them into the track, as the weight has already transferred to the rear of the car, and the car will have an imbalance. It will have much more grip at the back of the car than it would do at the front, and so you will quite simply understeer through the corner. So how do we make sure that we are trail braking into the corner at the perfect amount? Well, the first thing to think about is to be conscious about how you're releasing the brakes. You may notice that you are just jumping off the brake pedal. As you slow the car down and just before you turn the car into the corner, you'll want to make sure that you slowly bleed off the brakes to allow the front of the car to come up more slowly. You can play with this on corners like Brooklands at Silverstone, or corners where you have a very long entry coming into the apex, because it gives you more time to feel the balance and the brake pressure as you're coming in towards the apex. One thing to remember here is that most drivers don't think that the trail braking phase of the corner is quite as long as it actually needs to be. It does feel very slow as you're bleeding off the brakes as you increase the steering angle going in towards the apex. The next issue that we see a lot of is when drivers want to remove the ABS. Removing ABS can be very difficult. We see drivers do it, adapt to their driving and lose lots of pace and not really understand why. These drivers will find ways not to lock a tyre when they're on the brakes, but it comes at the cost of losing 2 to 3 seconds of lap time. However, get it right and turning ABS off can actually make you a lot faster. Not just because it's the fastest way to brake, but because locking tyres also gives you great feedback about when you are making a mistake. It all comes down to controlling the car with the maximum amount of grip that it has. When you turn ABS off, you can then lock the tyres when you're asking the car to do more than the grip that it actually has. When you had the ABS turned on, it was obviously hiding these issues. And so you'll need to adjust your driving technique and the way in which you brake. There are 2 reasons why tyres lock under braking. First of all, you're braking too hard for the amount of grip the tyre has. And secondly, you're trying to turn while you're still braking heavily. Because of the aero involved in Formula 1, you can brake at the maximum application when you're going at high speeds. You have more grip pushing the car into the track, and so you can absolutely hit that brake pedal very hard. However, as you slow down, you have less air coming over the car, you have less downforce, and therefore you can't brake at the maximum pressure. So be aware of your speed and learn how much you can brake and how much you need to release the brakes as the car decelerates. You should always make sure that you get to that maximum pressure as quickly as possible, because a common mistake that we see is when drivers are very slow to get on the brakes to that peak pressure. And of course, as I just mentioned, you'll also have to make sure that you release the brakes as you lose speed, because you're getting less and less grip as the car slows down. One tip here is to use the replay feature so you can take a turn multiple times in a row and see how much brake pressure you can get away with when you're braking in a straight line and at different speeds. Then, as we discussed before, if you overlap too much steering with braking, you'll end up using too much of the tyre's grip and the front tyres will begin to slide. With ABS on, this will cause you to understeer. However, with it off, this will cause a lockup. So ultimately, when you don't have the ABS on, you'll be able to see very easily that you're making a mistake. So if you are locking up as you turn your car into the corner, make sure you release the brake pressure a little bit on the following lap so you can allow some of that tyre's grip to be used for turning rather than slowing the car down. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about how to be quicker in F1 2021, check out these other videos which we think you'll love. Be sure to subscribe to the Driver 61 Sim Racing channel, and I'll see you in the next video. And I'd just like to say a quick thanks to Thrustmaster for sending us this SF1000 steering wheel, which is a replica from the Ferrari F1 car. It's available this week and you can check out more in the link in the description below.